Expand your vocabulary with our Core 2000 Words ebook. It's free and packed with essential expressions that you'll use on a daily basis. Start building your vocabulary today. Click the link in the description below to download your free Arabic ebook before it's gone.
Hi, welcome to Introduction to Arabic. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, I'm Yafa.
In this lesson, you'll learn the basics of Arabic writing. First, let's introduce you to the Arabic alphabet.
The Arabic alphabet consists of 28 letters.
There are 3 vowels:
Alif, Waw, Ya.
The rest are consonants:
Ba, Ta, Tha, Jim, Dal, Ra, Za,
and so on. 5 consonant letters are emphatic or hard versions of other letters. They're pronounced deeper in the throat.
Dad, Ha, Sad, Dha, Kaf. Let's talk a little bit about the sequence that they are written in.
Just like how English orders its alphabet in A, B, C, and so forth, there is a proper order in which Arabic letters are sequenced too.
There are actually 2 ways the Arabic alphabet is ordered. One is called abjad and the other hija. For this introductory lesson, just understand that abjad is the older version, while the hija is the newer version that's commonly used in modern-day dictionaries.
So if you had to choose, try to learn the newer version.
Hija. Just like how there are abjad and hija orders of the Arabic alphabet, there are also 2 different styles of writing in Arabic. The first is Classical Arabic, the language of the Quran, and the classical literature. It differs from the other type of written Arabic in style and vocabulary, some of which is abandoned now.
The second is Modern Standard Arabic, the universal language of the Arabic-speaking world, which is understood by all Arabic speakers. It's the language of the vast majority of written material and of formal TV shows, lectures, and so on.
Once again, you can think of them as the old and the newer style.
The biggest difference between these 2 writing styles is that Classical Arabic represents vowels, while Modern Standard Arabic mostly does not. Let's try to draw a comparison to English to better demonstrate this point. Take, for example, a word like cover in English. It's written C-O-V-E-R. This is how you would write it in Classical Arabic.
In Modern Standard Arabic, however, it's customary to omit the vowels. So it will be written CVR in Modern Standard Arabic.
In this case, the vowels are merely implied. It relies on you to fill in the gaps on your own to come up with the correct word based on context.
This makes learning Arabic more difficult in the beginning, but once you become proficient, it will be like reading in shorthand.
Let's see what it would look like in Arabic.
Take the verb for go in Arabic. Classical Arabic will be written like this. In pronounced, ذهب.
Modern Standard Arabic, however, would remove the vowels, so it would appear like this, and be pronounced
ذهب. 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 Vowel text appear in the Quran. They are also used, though with less consistency, in other religious texts, in classical poetry, in books for children, in foreign learners, and occasionally in complex texts to avoid ambiguity.
Modern Standard Arabic is used everywhere else, meaning it's much more common. So most of the time, the vowels would not be written at all.
The writing style of Arabic may require some getting used to, because unlike English and other Western languages, Arabic is written in the opposite direction, from right to left.
So, using the previous example,
ذهب. The goes first, followed by ha and then b. While words are written from right to left, numerals are written from left to right instead, so please keep that in mind.
Okay, now that you know that Arabic is written from right to left, let's talk a bit about the different forms of a letter.
As you can see, Arabic is written in cursive. Unlike English, writing cursive in Arabic is not optional. It is always written this way, where letters within a word connect from one to the next.
Each letter is written differently depending on their position within a word. A letter can exhibit up to 4 distinct forms: initial, medial, final, or isolated.
Take the letter B, for example.
This letter is written in the initial form. When it's the first letter in a word, it'll be written like this.
B, بيض.
It'll be written in the medial form when it's wedged between 2 other letters.
باء انطباع.
It'll be written in the final form when it's the last letter in a word.
باء واجب.
And when the letter stands alone, it'll be written using the isolated form.
باء.
Well done! Now let's end this lesson by recapping what we've learned. In this lesson, you learned that there are 28 letters in the Arabic alphabet. 3 of them are vowels and the rest are consonants. Texts using classical Arabic are voweled, but more commonly, everyday Arabic is written using modern standard Arabic, which nearly always has them omitted. You also learned that Arabic is written from right to left, and that there are 4 forms of a letter: the initial, medial, final, and isolated. In the next lesson, you'll be entering Arabic Boot Camp, where you'll learn useful beginner phrases to get you speaking Arabic right away. See you in the next lesson. Bye!
Bye.
أهلاً بكم، أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. Over the next 20 lessons, you'll learn everything there is to know about the reading and writing of the Arabic language. By the end, you'll be ready to dive into the world of Arabic literature, make your way through Arabian cities, and really accelerate your Arabic study. Ready to start? Then let's go! The Arabic alphabet contains 28 letters and their variations. Seeing them laid out like this might seem intimidating, but the trick is to take it step by step, letter by letter. Don't worry about how hard it looks now, just stick with me and in a few short lessons you'll see how easy it actually is. I have some really good news for you. Arabic is largely phonetic. This means words are pronounced exactly like they're written. Also, most Arabic sounds have counterparts in English. We'll use this similarity to English to tackle the Arabic writing system. Let's separate the letters into 2 types. The first type are the Arabic letters that have English counterparts, and the second type are those that don't. In this lesson, we learn 2 letters needed to write the pronoun I in Arabic. Both of them belong to the first type, so expect them to be really easy to pronounce. Ready? Let's begin. We'll start with Alif. So what sound does this letter make? That's easy. It's just like its English counterpart A in the word apple. Alif is very easy to write. It's basically a vertical stick. Now it's time to take out your pens and pencils. We're going to practice writing. Find some paper and follow along. We'll practice writing them so you can get used to the shapes. Okay, here we go. Alif. Nice! Time for the next letter? Not quite. You just saw the isolated version of Alif. However, Arabic is a cursive language. That means every letter in a word connects to the letter before or after it. So every time I introduce a new letter in this series, I'll also show you how it's written in all its possible positions. Let's get to know the different possible positions for a letter in Arabic. It's always one of 4: isolated, initial, medial, or final. Let's look at each of them. Isolated means that the letter has no letters before it or after it. It's the standard form we learned just a few minutes ago. Initial means that the letter lies in the beginning of a word, so it's connected to the letter after it, but has no letters before it. Are you confused because the initial position connects to the letter to the left of it? That's because Arabic is written from right to left. Medial means that the letter is connected from back and front to other letters. And final means that the letter is the last letter in a word, so it's only connected to the letter before it. With the exception of 6 letters, we must learn the 4 possible forms for all the letters in the Arabic alphabet. Those 6 exception letters don't have a distinct medial form and are instead written with their final form without being connected to the next letter. Their initial form is the same as the isolated form. By the way, the letter we learned today happens to be one of those exceptions. That means we only have to learn 2 forms, isolated and final. You already learned the isolated version, so you just need to learn the final version. Let's write it. Alif. Now we will learn the final letter needed to write the word I in Arabic. That's Nun. The Nun is pronounced just like the English N. Pretty easy, right? It basically looks like a semicircle with a dot on top. Remember that this is the isolated form. Let's write it. Nun. You got lucky with your first letter, but Nun requires that you learn all 4 forms. Let's get them all out of the way at once. So we have the initial form for when Nun appears at the beginning of a word, the medial form for when it appears in the middle of a word, and the final form for when it's at the end. Now try to write all 3. Nun. Great! You've already learned 2 letters of the Arabic alphabet. I think you're ready to learn your first Arabic word. The word you learned to write today is ana. This word means I. The first alif is isolated because it's at the beginning of the word. The second and the third letters, nun and alif, are connected. You may have noticed that the alif at the beginning has a little mark on the top. When alif is at the beginning of the word, we add this mark to it, but it's still the alif sound. There's an exception to this rule, but you can read about it in the lesson notes, and we'll talk more about this mark in a later lesson, so don't worry too much. Now try to write it yourself. Ana. Now it's time for Carol's tips. By now, you must be overwhelmed by all the different variations and exceptions. And you also might be worried about that weird mark in the word you learned today. Don't worry, you don't need to understand everything 100% by the end of this lesson. I'll present the new concepts slowly over the rest of these lessons, and you'll soon find that Arabic writing isn't all that scary. Have you ever heard the Arabic word ab? In the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson, you'll learn what it means, and most of all, how to write it. See you there, salam!
أهلا بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, we learned 2 letters, Alif and Nun. These letters have English counterparts. In this lesson, we'll continue our study of the Arabic alphabet by learning more letters that have English counterparts. Ready to go? Well then, let's get started. In this lesson, we'll learn these 3 letters. Note how they all look a lot like each other. This will help you memorize them. And because these have English counterparts, we know for sure that they are going to be easy to pronounce. Remember the Nun we learned in the previous lesson? There are 2 differences between the Nun and the 3 letters we're learning in this lesson. The first difference is the number and position of the dots. The second difference is that the isolated version of the Nun dips beneath the line like this, while the 3 letters in this lesson don't. Our first letter of this lesson is ba, and yeah, it makes a B sound. You can remember this because the dot is below the boat shape. Let's study the different ways to write it together. Now you write it. Ba. As we studied in the previous lesson, there are many forms for every letter in Arabic. The letter ba has 4 possible positions: isolated, initial, medial, and final. Let's see the remaining 3: initial, medial, final. Now we'll write them. Ba. That's all there is to ba. Let's move on. The second letter you'll learn in this lesson is another one that looks like ba. Ta. As you can see, the only difference is in the position and the number of the dots. The pronunciation is like the English T, except you should release your breath with a strong burst of air. Try it. Ta. Here's how to write the isolated version. Ta. This letter also has 4 possible positions: isolated, initial, medial, and final. Let's see the remaining 3. Okay, let's write them. Ta. Now let's finish up this lesson with the third letter of this group. Our final letter is tha. That's like the TH in the English word thief. Pretty easy, right? Tha has 3 dots on top of the boat-like letter, written in a triangle-like shape. Tha carries an extra letter, so we add a third dot. A third dot like 3. Here's how to write the isolated version. Tha. You're almost there. Here are the remaining variations of this letter: initial, medial, and final. Once you practice writing these a few times, they won't seem so difficult. Tha. Well done! I think you're ready to learn a new word. Can you read this? It's pronounced ab. This is the word for father in Arabic. The first letter is an isolated alif. We learned that in the previous lesson. Then there's an isolated ba. Pretty easy, huh? Now let's practice writing it. Ab. Now it's time for Carol's tips. Here's a useful reminder for memorizing the characters we've learned in this lesson. For the letter ba, the dot is below the line, and for the letters ta and tha, the dots are at the top. Be sure to add ana and ab to your notebook. We'll be learning new words in each lesson, and by the end of the series, you will have a very useful collection of words that you wrote yourself. In this lesson, we met 3 letters that look alike. In the next lesson, we'll see 3 more letters that look alike. See you in the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson. Salam! أهلا بكم، أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the first 2 lessons, we covered the 5 letters Alif, Nun, Ba, Ta, and Tha in the Arabic alphabet. Now we're going to take a look at some Arabic letters that are slightly more difficult to pronounce. I'll try to explain them in a simple way. Ready to go? Let's get started. In this lesson, we learn how to read and write 3 letters that look alike. Writing them should be easy, but pronouncing them is the most challenging part. Our first letter is Jim. This one is easy to pronounce. It's somewhere between a G and a J, depending on the accent. For example, Standard Arabic, Syrian, or Egyptian. In Standard Arabic and Syrian Arabic, it should sound like the J in the word jam, while in Egyptian Arabic, it sounds like the G in the word game. They're both quite easy to pronounce though. Now let's handwrite the isolated form. Jim. Here are the initial, medial, and final versions of Jim. Now we'll write them. Jim. The second letter we learn in this lesson is Ha. As you can see, it looks like the Jim, but without the dot in the hook. But of course, it doesn't sound like it. Ha is the first letter of the second group, meaning that it has no counterpart in English. It sounds like the sound you make when trying to cool your mouth and throat after eating something very spicy. The closest English counterpart to the sound is H. The only difference is that it comes from a point deeper down in your throat, just like this. Try it yourself. Here's how to write the isolated version. Ha. Here are the initial, medial, and final versions of Ha. Now we'll write them. Ha. The last letter we learn here is the Kha. This letter, like the Ha, has no English counterpart. Kha is a sound some people make when they laugh. It's also similar to the sound people make when they snore. According to phonetic charts, Ha is pronounced in a deeper part of the throat than Kha. Listen and repeat. Kha. Kha. Both Kha and Ha have no English counterparts. They're a bit tricky to pronounce, so let's practice these 2 letters in some words. First, a word which has Kha is khad. Khad means cheek in English. And one that has Ha is had. Had means limit. Can you hear the difference between khad and had? It might take some time before you can hear the differences clearly, so don't worry about it too much. Here's how to write the isolated version. Kha. Like its 2 friends, it has 3 other forms: initial, medial, and final. Now we'll write them. Kha. Let's learn a word using some of these letters. Taj. Repeat after me. Taj. Taj means crown. That's ta in the initial form, alif in the final form, and jim in the isolated form, disconnected from the alif before it, because as we learned in the first lesson, the alif connects differently. Now let's try writing it. Taj. First, write the ta. The boat connected to the alif, the two dots, then the jim in the isolated form. Nice work! Now it's time for Carol's tips. You may feel that Arabic cursive is difficult and has a lot of rules. It might feel foreign at first, but you'll get used to it if you start reading written Arabic frequently. Practice writing some words from the letters we've learned so far. Try the following. Najaha, meaning to succeed. Jan, meaning side. Hajj, meaning pilgrimage. Good job! Well, that's all for this lesson. We'll continue next time with a few more letters that look alike. Don't worry, next lesson's letters are very easy to pronounce. I'll see you in the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson. Salam! أهلا بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the previous lesson, we introduced 3 letters that look alike, except for some minor differences. Some were totally different. 2 of them were the first 2 letters of the 8 sounds that don't have English counterparts. Do you remember how to write them? Make sure that you feel confident about the characters from past lessons before you move on. In this lesson, we'll continue by learning 2 more letters that look alike. After that, we'll learn a few more words to add to your notebook. Ready? Let's go! Our first letter is Dal. It's just like the English D. Very easy to pronounce and easy to write as well. Here's the isolated form. Dal. It's a single stroke. You start from the top and then form a right angle. And that's it, done. Just like the alif we learned, the initial form of this letter is just like its isolated form, and the medial form is like the final form. Now we'll write it. Dal. The second letter we learn in this lesson looks like the previous letter, Dal. It's the Dal. Note how it does not dip beneath the line. We'll learn 2 letters in the next lesson that dip beneath the line. That's why you should make sure you differentiate between them. This letter is like the TH sound in the word this. Do you remember that we learned another letter corresponding to the English TH sound? It was Tha, and it's pronounced as a silent TH, as in thief. This letter's pronunciation is a voiced sound, the, as in this or that. It's pronounced with the tongue between the upper and the lower teeth. It's quite easy to pronounce. Here's how to write the isolated version. Dhal. Now let's see how it looks like in its other forms. As you can see, it's just like its lookalike, Dal. The initial form is the same as the isolated, and the medial form is the same as the final. If you know how to write Dal, then you just need to add a dot to write Dal. Handwriting time. Dal. We'll continue learning more letters next time, but for now, let's practice using these letters in some new words. First up is the word Jad. It means grandfather. That's the jim we learned in the previous lesson in initial form, connected to the dal we learned in this lesson in its final form. Okay, now try writing it. Jad. Let's start with the jim. Then connect it to the dal. Great job! Let's try another word. إذا means if. We learned the alif in the first lesson and the dhal in this lesson. Here you can see that little mark from lesson 1 is now at the bottom of alif and has changed the sound to an E. Don't worry too much about it for now. Now let's try writing it by hand. إذا. Now it's time for Carol's tips. Handwriting is kind of like a signature in every language, and no two people's handwriting is the same. It's better to learn the basics and the standard form of the alphabet and get used to it first, then develop your own style. Good luck! That's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll meet our next two letters, which look a lot like the letters from this lesson. Salam! أهلاً بكم، أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the previous lesson, we introduced some more letters that look alike. We've already learned several, but do you remember how to read and write them? Taking the time to review the lessons will be the key to learning how to write in Arabic. In this lesson, we learned two letters that look alike and also kind of look like the two letters in the previous lesson. Then we'll learn a few more words for you to add to your notebook. Ready to learn? Then let's go. Our first letter is Ra. Its closest English counterpart is the letter R, but it's a different sound that must be learned. Ra. It's not too hard to pronounce though, right? Note how it looks like the Dal, but dips beneath the line. Make sure not to confuse them. Here's the isolated form. Ra. Now let's take a look at the other forms. Just like the alif, dal, and dhal, the letters in this lesson connect differently. The isolated one is like the initial form, and the medial version is like the final one. Now we'll write it. Ra. The second letter we learn in this lesson looks pretty familiar. Zayn. As you can see, it looks similar to the Ra, but with a dot on top. In terms of pronunciation, you say it just like the English Z, as in zebra, or Al Jazeera. Practice saying Al Jazeera if you want to practice both the sounds Ra and Zayn at the same time. It's the perfect word for it. Al Jazeera. Here's how to write the isolated version. Zayn. Start from the top, dip it below the line, then put a dot on top. Done. Now let's take a look at the other forms of Zayn. You can probably guess that the isolated version is like the initial and the medial is like the final. Now let's write it. Zayn. And that's all. Wow, great job today. We'll continue learning more letters in the next lesson, but for now, let's practice using these letters in some new words. First up is the word that uses two of our new letters. Try reading it out loud. It should be easy. It's pronounced jazar and means carrot. The jim is connected to the zayn, but the ra and the zayn aren't connected to each other because they are in medial and final positions. Now let's try writing it. Jazar. Now let's try to write another word. It's rad, meaning reply, like when you're replying to an email or message or someone talking. This verb uses only two letters and both are written like isolated letters. Let's write it. Red. The last word we have in this lesson is the verb zara, which means visited. Note how all the three letters in this word connect differently, and so they are all isolated. Let's write it together. Zara. Now it's time for Carol's tips. Grouping letters into those with similar characteristics makes memorizing them much easier. Just make sure you don't confuse them. Some letters look very much alike, the only difference is dots and their position. By reading more, you'll get used to the difference between the letters and their pronunciation. Good luck! In the next lesson, we'll be doing a review of the letters we've learned so far. And we'll also give some detailed explanations about the little things we didn't cover in the past lessons, for the sake of focusing on writing and pronunciation. Let's get more in-depth in the next lesson. Salam! أهلا بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, we introduced two letters of the first group that look alike, Ra and Zayn. If you've been practicing, I'm sure you're doing a great job. This lesson will be a great chance for you to review all the letters we learned so far. Let's practice together. First, we'll review the basic rules. In this series, we've classified the Arabic alphabet into two groups. The first one is the group of the letters with counterparts in English language. The second one is the group of the letters that don't have counterparts in English. That means they will be a bit more challenging to pronounce, but remember, practice makes perfect. Letters of the Arabic alphabet have four ways to connect to the letters before and after them: isolated, initial, medial, and final. However, there are letters that don't follow that rule and only have two forms of connection. They are Alif, Dal, Dhal, Ra, Zayn, Waw. Now let's review the letters we've learned so far. In the first lesson, we learned Alif and Nun. They are the letters you need to form the word ana, meaning the pronoun I. First, we have Alif. Here's the isolated form. And here's the final form. Alif only has two forms, as we've already explained before. Now let's review Nun. Isolated, initial, medial, and final. That's it for the first lesson. Did you remember that the initial form of Alif is the same as the isolated form, and the medial form is the same as the final form? Now let's move on to the next lesson. In the second lesson, we learned Ba, Ta, and Tha. First, we have Ba. Isolated, initial, medial, final. Then there's Ta, isolated, initial, medial, final. Finally, we have Tha, isolated, initial, medial, final. That's it for lesson 2. Their shapes look like a boat, remember? Next, let's review lesson 3. In the third lesson, we learned 3 more letters that look alike: Jim, Ha, and Kha. Here's Jim. Isolated, initial, medial, final. Now let's check ha, isolated, initial, medial, final. Finally, we have kha, isolated, initial, medial, final. That's it for lesson 3. Next, let's review lesson 4. In the 4th lesson, we learned Dal and Dhal. First, we have the Dal, isolated and initial, medial and final. Now let's check the Dhal, isolated and initial, medial and final. That's it for lesson 4. These letters are 2 of the 6 which only have 2 forms. Finally, let's review lesson 5. In the 5th lesson, we learned Ra and Zayn. These 2 letters also have only 2 forms. First, we have Ra, isolated initial, medial final. Then there's Zayn, isolated initial, medial final. And that's the end of our review for the first 5 lessons. Did you remember most of them? Keep practicing and you'll get better in no time. Now we'll continue with some Arabic writing rules. To be able to read Arabic correctly, you also need to master the voweling system of the Arabic language. Voweling signs are marks above or beneath the letter that adds a vowel sound to that letter. However, vowels in the voweling signs are pronounced shorter than the actual vowels. Let's see the 3 basic voweling signs when used with ba. First, here's the fatha. The pronunciation will now be ba. Next, this is a kasra. This is now pronounced as bi. And finally, here's the dhamma. It changes the pronunciation to bu. Now, let's practice writing and pronouncing these basic voweling signs. Akh, brother. Akh, ukht, sister. Ukht, jad, grandfather. Jad, ana, I. أنا, أنت, you. أنت. Voweling is very important because it can change a word's meaning. For example, here are 2 words that have the same letters but are pronounced differently and have different meanings because of the difference in voweling. Har means hot, while hur means free. There are other voweling signs in Arabic, but they aren't as common as the 3 basic signs we learned in this lesson. We'll go back to them in the next review lesson. Now it's time for Carol's tips. The concept of voweling might feel a bit unnatural to non-native speakers. However, Arabic learners need voweling to be able to read correctly, especially when faced with new words. Native speakers don't need voweling because they know the words and how they're pronounced already. Make sure you master the 3 signs we learned in this lesson. They will help you read faster and more correctly. Good luck! That's it for this lesson. I hope this has helped you memorize the letters we've learned so far and get a feel of how the voweling system in Arabic works. You did a great job. In the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson, we'll learn 2 more letters of the first group that look alike. See you then. Salam! أهلاً بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, we practiced reading and writing all the letters we've learned so far. We also learned the 3 basic voweling signs in Arabic. From now on, we are going to write the words we learn with voweling, so get ready. Let's go! In this lesson, we'll continue with 2 letters from the first group, meaning that they have English counterparts, which is good news for us. Those are Shin and Shin. Let's start with Shin. Shin sounds just like the English S. It's very easy to pronounce. Let's see how it's written. Here's the isolated version. Shin. Now let's see the rest of the letter forms. Initial, medial, and final. Let's write them. Sin. The next letter we learn is Shin. This one is pronounced just like the English sh in the word shovel. This one is very easy as well. It looks just like the Sin, except that it has 3 dots on top in a triangular formation, like the Tha we learned in lesson 2. Let's write it down in the isolated form. Shin. Now let's see the rest of the forms. Initial, medial, final. Here's how to write them. Shin. Note how Sin and Shin dip underneath the line when they are in the isolated and final forms, just like the Nun we learned in the first lesson of this series. Now let's learn some words using these 2 letters and the letters we learned before. First we have sir, meaning secret. Sin is in the initial form with a kasra beneath, connected to ra in the final form. Here's how to write it. Sir. The next word we have is shariba. It means to drink. Shin is in the initial form with a fatha on top, connected to ra in the final form, with a kasra beneath, then ba in the isolated form. Writing time. Shariba. Now it's time for Carol's tips. Taking note of letters that dip beneath the line and letters that don't can help improve your handwriting. The letters we learned so far that dip beneath the line are Ra, Zayn in all their forms, and Nun, Sin, Shin in their isolated and final forms. Also, it's best to practice on lined paper, not blank paper, for more structured handwriting. Next time, we learn 2 letters that look alike. However, they are challenging to pronounce.
I'll get you through them in the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson. Take care. Salam. أهلاً بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, we learned 2 more letters of the first group that look alike. I hope you remember how to read and write them. In this lesson, we learned 2 new letters that look alike, but they are in the second group, which means they are a bit challenging to pronounce. But remember, with practice, nothing is impossible. At the end of the lesson, we'll look at some new words and phrases to add to your notebook. Ready to learn? Then let's go. The first letter we have in this lesson is Sad. The Sad is basically the strong version of the Shin we learned in the last lesson. And it kind of sounds like the S in the word saw. This sound is pronounced with your throat constricted. Listen to Sad and Sin with the vowel Alif we learned in the first lesson. Sa, sa. Hear the difference? You'll have to do this for a few more letters later on, so please get used to using your throat like this. Let's write it down in the isolated version. Sad. Here are the initial, medial, and final forms of this letter. Now we'll write them. Sad. The next letter we learn is Dad. This one is like a strong version of the Dal, kind of like the D in the word daughter. It looks just like the Sad, except that it has a dot on top. The difference between this letter and Dal is the same as the difference between Sad and Sin, with your throat constricted. Dad. Here's how to write it in the isolated form. Dad. Now let's check the rest of the forms. Initial, medial, final. Here's how to write them. Dad. These 2 letters also dip underneath the line when they are in the isolated and final form, just like these other letters. Do you remember them? Now, let's learn 2 new words which use the letters we've learned so far. Our first word is sabr. It means patience. Sad is in the initial form with a fatha on top. Then we have the ba in the medial form without voweling, connected to ra in the final form. Here's how to write it. Sabr. Our next word is darar. It means damage. It's dad in the initial form with a fatha on top, followed by ra in the final form with a fatha on top, and ra in the isolated form.
Let's see how we write this word. ضرر. Now it's time for Carol's tips. One of the most challenging things in learning a new language is having to learn how to pronounce letters that don't exist in your own language. It takes time to learn, but it's possible with constant practice and listening to how native speakers pronounce these letters. Are you ready for your next challenge? We'll be learning 2 more letters from the second group in the next Abjadiya Made Easy lesson. I'll see you then. Salam! أهلاً بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiya. In the last lesson, we learned 2 letters in the second group that look alike. In this lesson, we learn another set of similar letters from the second group. I know how frustrating it is to learn letters that are hard to pronounce, but don't worry. There aren't many left in that group. Ready to learn? Then let's go. The first letter we have in this lesson is Ayn. It looks like a mirror image of the number 3, but it dips beneath the line in the isolated and final forms. Ayn doesn't sound like any other letter in the Arabic or English alphabet. The sound comes from a very deep part in the throat. Let's practice it together. Repeat after me. Ayn. Let's write the isolated form. Ayn. Now let's see the other forms of Ayn. Take note how they all look a bit different. Initial, medial, final. Let's see how we write them. Ayn. The next letter we learn is Ghayn. This one is like the French R. It looks just like the Ayn, except that it has a dot on top. Its sound is similar to the sound you make when you gargle, a sound that comes from a point deep in the throat. Listen carefully. Ghayn. Let's write it down in the isolated version. Ghayn. Now for the rest of the forms, initial, medial, and final. Let's write them down. Ghayn. Now let's learn some words using these 2 letters combined with some of the letters we learned before. Our first word is abra, meaning through. Ayn is in the initial form with a fatha on top. Then we have the ba in the medial form without voweling, connected to the ra in the final form with a fatha on top. Let's write it. Abra. The next word is غدر, which means betrayal. Ghayn is in the initial form with a fatha on top, connected to a final dal with no voweling, then ra in the isolated form. Let's write it down. غدر. Now it's time for Carol's tips. In this lesson, you learned the letter Ayn. Ayn is also the Arabic word for eye. For example, the expression al-ayn bil-ayn was sin bis-sin means eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Great job in making it this far. Next time, we'll be having another review lesson and we'll learn more voweling signs. I'll see you in the next Abjadiya Made Easy lesson. Take care. Salam. أهلا بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiya. Congratulations! We're done with the hardest letters in the Arabic language, so you can expect the next lessons to be much easier. But first, we'll have a review. In the past 4 lessons, you learned several letters with sounds that you have never heard or pronounced before. Do you remember the letters we learned in lesson 7? They were Sin and Shin. Both of them are very easy to pronounce. First, we have Sin, the isolated form, and the other 3 forms: initial, medial, final. Now let's review Shin. Isolated, initial, medial, final. That's it for lesson 7. Now on to lesson 8's letters. In lesson 8, we learned Sad and Dad. Here's the Sad. Isolated, initial, medial, final. And then the Dad, isolated, initial, medial, final. Next, let's review lesson 9. We learned Ta and Dha. First, we have the Ta, isolated, initial, medial, final. Now here's the Dha, isolated, initial, medial, and final. And now here are the letters we learned last lesson: Ayn and Ghayn. First, let's review Ayn, isolated, initial, medial, final. Finally, let's see Ghayn one more time. Isolated, initial, medial, final. That's it for these lessons. Did you remember most of them? Keep practicing and you'll get better. Now it's time to learn another voweling sign. In the previous review lesson, we learned the fatha, dhamma, and kasra. In this lesson, we will learn the shda. Unlike in English, To repeat the same sound twice in Arabic, you don't use the same letter twice in a row. Instead, you use the shda symbol. So, if you see a symbol that looks like a 3 on its side on top of a letter, then it means that that letter is to be pronounced twice. The shda could also be used in combination with the fatha, dhamma, and kasra. First, here's how the fatha shadda combination looks like when used with ba. And here's the dhamma shadda combination. Finally, here's the kasra shadda combination. Take note that the kasra is put below the shadda and not the letter like when it's used on its own. Also, make sure that you don't confuse it with the fatha shadda combination, wherein the fatha is on top of the shadda. Now let's learn how to write and pronounce some new words that use shadda. Barrad, refrigerator. Barrad. Habbar, cuttlefish. Habbar. Sabbar, cactus. Sabbar. Attar, spice dealer. Attar. Now it's time for Carol's tips. Keep writing the words and letters we've learned so far so you don't forget them. Also, try combining random letters and pronouncing them. It doesn't have to make sense in Arabic, but remember to use the correct form of the letter, whether it's in the isolated, initial, medial, or final form. Add in some voweling signs for even more challenge. That's it for this lesson. You've done a great job getting this far. Next time, we'll be back to learning 2 new letters. I'll be waiting for you in the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson. See you then. Salam. أهلا بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, we did a recap of lessons 7 to 10, where we covered the most difficult letters in the Arabic alphabet. I hope you remember how to write and pronounce them. In this lesson, we learned 2 new letters which are a little easier to pronounce and write. Plus, they also look alike. Ready to learn? Let's go! The first letter we're going to learn today is fa. Fa is pronounced just like the English F. Notice how this letter has 1 dot on top of the circle-like part because the next letter will look a bit like it, but not quite. Let's write the isolated form. Fa. Here are the other forms of fa. Initial, medial, final. Now it's time to write them. Fa. Let's move on to the second letter, Kaf. The Kaf looks a bit like the previous letter Fa, except it has 2 dots and a shorter and more curved tail. It also dips beneath the line. Think about the word call and notice how it comes from deep in the throat. It's a stronger version of the letter K, said with the throat constricted, like in Sad and Dad. Now let's handwrite the isolated form. Kaf. Here are the initial, medial, and final versions of Kaf. Now we'll write them. Kaf. That's it for our two letters. Now let's learn a couple of words using them. Our first word is farah. This word can mean two things, happiness or wedding. Fa is in the initial form with a fatha on top, ra in the final form, also with a fatha on top, and then a ha in the isolated form. Let's write it. Farah. Let's learn another word. Farq means difference. Here we have a fa in the initial form with a fatha on top. Then we have a ra in the final form, followed by a qaf in the isolated form. Here's how to write it. Farq. Now it's time for Carol's tips. While we are learning some very useful and important words along the way in this series, I hope you are also seeking out other opportunities to read, write, speak, and listen to Arabic. Check out the full range of ArabicPod101.com's lessons for more materials. I hope you're enjoying learning how to write this beautiful alphabet. In the next lesson, we'll introduce two important letters in the Arabic language, and they also look similar. I hope you're excited. See you in the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson. Take care. Salam. أهلا بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, we learned two new letters in the Arabic alphabet. Do you remember how to write and pronounce them? Remember to keep practicing. In this lesson, we learned two new letters of the first group that will be very easy to write and pronounce. They also kind of look alike. Ready to learn? Then let's go. The first letter we're going to learn today is Kaf. The Kaf is pronounced just like the English K. Here's how to write the isolated form. Kaf. Let's look at the other forms of Kaf. Initial, medial, final. Note how the isolated and final versions of this letter are very different from the initial and medial versions. The first two look like a hook with a little mark inside, while the second two look like an arrowhead pointing to the left. This is one of the few letters in Arabic that have very different forms, depending on their position in the word. Now we'll write them. Kaf. Our second letter for this lesson is Lam. It looks a bit like the previous letter Kaf in its isolated and final forms. The Lam sounds like the English L. Very easy to pronounce, right? Now let's handwrite the isolated form. Lam. Here are the other forms of Lam. Initial, medial, final. Okay, let's write them. Lam. Can you see the main differences between the two letters we learned in this lesson? There are two main differences between Kaf and Lam. The Kaf doesn't dip underneath the line, while the Lam in its isolated and final form does. The other difference is the little mark in Kaf. Great job! Now let's take what we've learned so far and look at some examples that we can write. The first word is kataba. It means to write in the past tense. Kaf is in the initial form with a fatha on top, followed by a ta in the medial form, again with a fatha on top, and then a ba in the final form, also with a fatha. Let's try and write it together. Kataba. The second word is fa'ala. It means to do in the past tense. Here we have a fa in the initial form, ayn in the medial form, and a lam in the final form. Just like the previous kataba, all of the letters have a fatha. Let's write it down. Fa'ala. Now it's time for Carol's tips. When practicing your Arabic writing at home, it's a great idea to sound out the words as you write them. This helps you get used to reading Arabic letters and saying the sounds out loud. For learners, pronunciation is more challenging than writing. If you've been silent up to this point, try to say the words from this lesson now. Kataba, fa'ala. If you're not used to saying Arabic, you'll probably make a few mistakes, but that's all part of learning. In the next lesson, we'll continue learning a few more easy letters from the first group, the one that has English counterparts. I hope you're excited. I'll see you in the next Abjadiya Made Easy lesson. Take care. Salam. أهلاً بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiya. In the last lesson, we learned the Kaf and Lam. Do you remember how to read and write them? I hope you're ready to move on. In this lesson, we're going to learn one new letter from the first group and review one which we have tackled in the first lesson. They are Mim and Nun. Note how Kaf, Lam, Mim, Nun are arranged just like in the English alphabet, K, L, M, N. This should make it easier for you to memorize the Arabic alphabet. Now let's start with our first letter, Mim. This letter sounds just like the English M, and it should be pretty easy to pronounce. Let's write it in the isolated form. Mim. Now let's see the other possible forms. Initial, medial, final. It's basically a circle, and the way it connects to the letters around it depends on its position. Here's how to write them. Mim. Now let's see the next letter. It's Nun. We learned Nun at the beginning of the series, together with Alif, in order to form Ana. Do you remember what Ana means? Right, it means I. The Nun sounds just like the English N. Let's remember how to write it together. Nun. Here's the isolated form. And here's the initial form. Here's the medial form. And then the final form. Do they look familiar? I hope you remembered them. Now, let's learn a couple of new words using Mim, Nun, and some letters we've previously learned. Our first word is makan, meaning place. Here we have a mim with a fatha on top, connected to a kaf. Then we have an alif in the final form because it doesn't have a medial form. After this is nun in the isolated form because it cannot be connected directly to the alif. Let's learn how to write it together. Makan. For our next word, we have nar. This means fire. Nun is in the initial form, connected to a final alif, which, as we've seen, does not connect to the letter after it. So for the last letter, we have an isolated ra. Let's write it. Nar. Now it's time for Carol's tips. Unlike a few years ago, it's very easy to see how real Arabs write by using social media. Find some people to follow on Twitter or Facebook and see how much you can read. It may be a little too advanced for you at this point, but you can start getting used to common words and expressions used in the Middle East today. We're almost done. In the next lesson, we'll continue learning a few more easy letters from the first group. I'll see you in the next Abjadiya Made Easy lesson. Take care, salam. أهلاً بكم أنا كارول. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiya. In the last lesson, we learned Mim and Nun, which comes after Kaf and Lam, just like K, L, M, and N in the English alphabet. In this lesson, we learned two letters that are going to help you to better understand an important aspect of the Arabic language, feminine and masculine words. These should help you conjugate verbs and adjectives easily. These two letters are Ta and ha. Are you ready to write them? Then let's go. Let's start with our first letter, ha. This letter sounds just like the English H, and it should be very easy to pronounce. Try it. Ha. Let's write it in its isolated form. Ha. Let's look at the other forms of ha. Initial, medial, final. Unlike the ta and the dha we learned in lesson 9, every version of this letter looks different. Pay attention. Here's how to write them. Ha. The next letter for this lesson is ta. As you can see, it looks very similar to the previous one, but it has 2 dots on top. This letter can only exist at the end of a word. This means that it can only be in the final or in the isolated form. Both forms are written just like their look-alike letter, ha, but with the 2 additional dots. Ta can also be tricky because its pronunciation varies depending on its position in a sentence. It can be either an H or a T. The rule of thumb is that as long as the word is pronounced alone and not in a sentence, then it's pronounced as an H. Let's try writing ta. Isolated, final. When you see this letter appearing at the end of any word, it means that this word is feminine, be it a noun or an adjective. Keep this in mind because it's going to help you a lot when you start learning Arabic grammar. And that's it for this lesson's letters. I hope this wasn't too complicated. Now, let's learn a couple of new words using the new letters we've just learned. Our first word is sahl, meaning easy. Here we have an initial sin with a fatha on top, connected to a ha in medial form, which is connected to lam in the final form. Let's see how to write it. Sahl. Next we have lugha, a very important word meaning language. Lam is in the initial form with a dhamma on top, connected to a medial ghayn with a fatha on top, connected to a ta in the final form. Let's write it. Lugha. Now it's time for Carol's tips. You may be thinking that we've already learned ta in an earlier lesson. You're right, in the second lesson we learned ta, which looks like this. Remember? The name is the same and it's pronounced the same. So why do we even have this new ta? It's because the ta we learned in this lesson is used as a grammatical marker. Like I said before, when a word ends with this letter, it means it's a feminine word. So you may be confused about it now, but when you get into more complicated Arabic grammar, you will find it very helpful. Great! We've covered a lot in the previous lessons, but don't worry if you can't remember some of the minor details, because we'll be reviewing everything we learned in the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson. Take care, salam!
أهلا بكم أنا نورة. Hi, I am Nora. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. Congratulations, you're done with the hardest letters of Arabic. So the good news is you can expect the next lessons to be much easier. Welcome to our third review lesson of the series, where you can recap what you've learned in lessons 12 to 15. You learned many letters in the past 4 lessons, but do you remember all of them? In this lesson, we're reviewing these letters and we'll go in depth with some grammar rules too. Are you ready? Let's go. Now, let's revise the letters you've learned so far. In lesson 12, you learned fe and qaf. The fe is just like the English F, while the qaf is a stronger version of the English K. Let's practice writing them together one more time. First, we have the fe, isolated. Initial. Medial. Final. Now let's talk about the qaf, isolated. Initial. Medial. Final. That's it for lesson 12. Let's see lesson 13's letters. In lesson 13, you learned Kaf and Lam. Those two sounded just like the letters K and L. Let's practice writing them together one more time. First, we have the Kaf, isolated. Initial. Medial. Final. Now let's talk about the Lam, isolated. Initial. Medial. Final. That's it for lesson 13. Next, let's see lesson 14. In lesson 14, you learned Mim, Nun. They are like M and N. Easy, isn't it? Let's practice writing them together one more time. First, we have the Mim. Isolated. Initial. Medial. Final. Now, let's talk about the Nun. Isolated. Initial. Medial. Final. That completes the review of Lesson 14. Next, let's see Lesson 15. In Lesson 15, you learned Ha, Ta Marbuta. The Ha sounds like the English H, while the Ta Marbuta can sound either like an H or a T, depending on the position of the word it's in inside the sentence. Let's practice writing them together one more time. First, we have the Ha. Isolated. Initial. Medial. Final. In most cases, the letter ha at the end of a word indicates possession by a third-person masculine, like in qalbuh, which means his heart, where we see the letter in the final form. Now, let's talk about the Ta Marbuta. As you saw in the last lesson, this letter can only exist in the final form, which is sometimes isolated if it follows a letter that connects differently, like in hurra, meaning free, in the feminine form. Isolated. Final. Generally, if the voweling of the Ta Marbuta is pronounced, like when it's in a word in the middle of a sentence, it will be pronounced as a T. You also studied how the Ta Marbuta at the end of any word means it's a feminine word, like shajara, meaning tree, which is a feminine noun in Arabic. And that's it for the review of these lessons. Did you remember most of them? Now, let's move on to learning more voweling signs. In the previous review lesson, you learned the shda. Do you remember what it looks like? Yes, it looks like the number 3 looking upwards. And we learned that it's used to double the sound of the letter it's used in. In this lesson, you will learn more voweling signs that will help you read Arabic more efficiently. Let's learn the tennwin. The tennwin can only happen at the end of the word, and it's basically a nun sound at the end of a word. Tennwin has many shapes according to the basic vowelling of the last letter in the word, a dhamma, a fatha, or a kasra. You need to be able to read it if you see it, so let's see what it looks like. Check how the dhamma tanween looks like in the word rajulun, which means man, in the nominative case and the indefinite form. Here's how fatha tanween looks like. Wardatan, meaning flower, in the accusative case and the indefinite form. And kasra tanween looks like this. Qalbin, which means heart, in the genitive case and the indefinite form. Notice how the Ta Marbuta is pronounced as a T in this word. Having tanween is one of the cases in which Ta Marbuta is pronounced as a T because the vowelling of the letter is pronounced. There is also a vowelling sign that means the letter containing it should be pronounced without any vowelling. It's called the sukun, and it looks like this. Ahmar, which means red. And as you can see, there's a sukun over the ha because it has no pronounced vowelling sound, no dhamma, fatha, or kasra. Now let's combine all the vowelling signs we learned so far and make some new words. Shukran, thank you, with a dhamma on the Shin, a sukun on the Kaf, a fatha on the Ra, and a tennwin fatha on the Alif. Afwan, no problem, with a fatha on the Ayn, a sukun on the Fa, a fatha on the Waw, and a tennwin fatha on the Alif. Ahlan, welcome, with a fatha on the Alif, a sukun on the Ha, a Lam, and a tennwin fatha on the Alif. Sahlun, easy, with a fatha on the Sin, a sukun on the Ha, and a tennwin dhamma on the Lam. Fursatin, chance, with a dhamma on the Fa, a sukun on the Ra, a fatha on the Sad, and the tennwin kasra under the Ta Marbuta. Now it's time for a tip. In Arabic, vowelling involves seeing a vowel symbol located above or under a letter to indicate how this letter will be pronounced. It's something of a learning aid. Native Arabic speakers usually don't need vowelling to be able to read because they already know the words and how they're pronounced. But for a non-native speaker, it's a bit of a challenge to read without vowelling. That's why the more you learn new words, the easier it will be to read without vowelling. But for the time being, relying on vowelling signs will make reading easier and faster. That's it for this lesson. I hope this lesson helped you to memorize the letters covered in lessons 12 to 15. You did a great job, and you're almost there. There are only a couple of letters left to master to be able to read any Arabic word in the dictionary. Salam! Marhaban, ana Noura. Hi, I am Nora. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, you reviewed the letters you learned in lessons 12 to 15. Do you remember how to read and write them? Let's move on. In this lesson, you'll learn the two remaining vowels in Arabic, Waw and Ya. First, let's start with Waw. This letter sounds like the English U in the word tune. It should be pretty easy to pronounce. It's a circle above the line connected to a short stroke that extends beneath the line. It kind of looks like a big comma, doesn't it? Let's write the isolated form. Waw only has two forms, just like the Alif, Ra, Zayn, Dal, and Dhal. The initial form is like the isolated form, and the medial form is the same as its final form. Here's how to write isolated initial form. Medial, final. Now let's see the next letter, Ya. This is the last vowel in the Arabic alphabet. It's pronounced just like the sound E in the word tin. Pretty easy, right? You can imagine this letter as a duck with the two dots below it as its feet. Here's how to write the isolated version. Let's see the other versions of this letter. Initial. Medial. Final. Did you notice how it looks so different in the final form and the isolated form? It dips beneath the line in these forms. For the initial and medial form, it looks like the te, but with dots beneath the boat-like character instead of above it. That's it for this lesson's letters. Now let's learn a couple of new words together using our newly learned vowels. Our first word is مشغول, which means busy. Here we have an initial mim with a fatha on top, connected to a medial shin, connected to a medial ghayn, then to a final waw. Lastly, the lam is written in the isolated form because waw does not have a medial form which connects to the letter after it. Here's how to write مشغول, busy. Next we have jamil, meaning beautiful. Jim is in the initial form, connected to a medial mim, connected to another medial ya, and then to a final lam. Here's how to write jamil, beautiful. Now it's time for Nora's tips. You may think that Arabic is a very alien language compared to others, but that's not actually the case. Arabic is an ancient language, and it's only natural that many other languages have loan words from it. In fact, many English words have Arabic origins. For example, algebra comes from the Arabic word al-jabr. Also, alchemy originates from the Arabic word al-kimya, and many more. Okay, we're done with the basic letters. In the next lesson, we'll introduce some new versions of Alif. See you in the next Abjadiyya Made Easy lesson. Take care. Salam. مرحبا أنا نورة. Hi, I am Nora. Welcome to ArabicPod101.com's Abjadiyya Made Easy, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn the Arabic alphabet, the Abjadiyya. In the last lesson, we reviewed a vowel we had come across before, the Alif, and studied a variation of the Alif Layyina. Now let's move on. In this lesson, you will learn all there is to know about glottal stops in Arabic. This is the last thing you need to complete the Arabic alphabet. You already learned that the glottal stop, or hamza, can be found on the alif in some cases. But did you know that this isn't the only form of the glottal stop? In fact, there are 3 additional versions. But before we explore these, let's first review the different types of vowel signs in Arabic. Fatha is when the consonant has an a sound attached to it, like the word matar. Here we have two fathas, one on the mim and the other on the ta. Dhamma is when the consonant has an u sound attached to it, like the word mundhu. Here we have two dhammas, one on the mim and the other on the dhal. And last but not least, the kasra is when the consonant has an e sound attached to it, like the word kitab. Here we have one kasra underneath the kaf. Do you remember the main vowel signs now? You can review them in Lesson 6 of this series in more detail. Now, let's learn the glottal stop, or hamza. The first version is the hamza on the line. With some exceptions, it is usually found at the end of a word and has a fatha voweling if it's found in the medial location. It looks like a small number 2 but mirrored. Let's write it in the isolated form. This is the only form for this letter. Let's see it in some words. Shay, thing. قراءة, reading. بطيء, slow. Now let's see the next version. This one is used when the voweling of the letter before the glottal stop is dhamma. It's usually found in the medial form. Let's see what it looks like. It's a waw with a hamza on top of it. Isolated. Medial. Now let's take a look at some words containing this letter. بؤرة, spot. بؤس, misery. رؤية, vision. Note how the voweling sign of the letter before the hamza is dhamma in all of these examples. Now let's see the last version. This one is used when the voweling of the hamza itself or the letter before the hamza is kasra. So it's an alif layina with the hamza on top of it. It is usually found in the medial or final form. Let's see what it looks like. Isolated. Medial. Final. Now let's see some words containing this letter. First, let's see examples where the letter before the hamza has a kasra voweling. بيئة, environment. شاطئ, beach. Next, let's see examples where the hamza itself has a kasra voweling. مائل, tilted. طائر, bird. If you're confused about voweling, review Lesson 6 for reference. You'll soon get used to them with time and a little practice. And that's it for this lesson. Now let's learn a couple of new words using these glottal stops. Our first word is Sahra, which means desert, like the Sahara Desert of North Africa. In the word Sahra, we have a sad with a fatha connected to a ha, connected to a ra, isolated from the alif because of how it connects, isolated from the hamza because it doesn't connect to any of the letters around it. Now let's write it together. Sahra, desert. It's not that difficult, is it? Next we have Ka'in, meaning creature. Here we have a kaf in the initial form, connected to an alif, isolated from the hamza on alif layina in the medial form, connected to a final nun. Try writing it with me. Ka'in, creature. Now it's time for Nora's tips. The glottal stop variations aren't used as much as the rest of the letters of the alphabet, but you need to know how to read and write them for the words that do have those letters. Practice them a lot so you don't forget them. These were the last letters of the Arabic alphabet. The next lesson will be our last review lesson. Salam!
Expand your vocabulary with our Core 2000 Words ebook. It's free and packed with essential expressions that you'll use on a daily basis. Start building your vocabulary today. Click the link in the description below to download your free Arabic ebook before it's gone.